Revenge with Karen.
You learn a lot about a person by watching how they eat a shrimp cocktail when they think nobody important is looking. I've spent 20 years standing in the corners of ballrooms that smell like lilies and tax evasion, holding a silver tray until my fingerprints are practically etched into the metal. I am the invisible woman. I am the wallpaper in a polyester vest. To the tech bros, the venture capitalists, and the trophy wives of Palm Beach, I'm just staff. Don't have a name, I have a function. More champagne. Clean this up. Where's the powder room? But here's the thing about being invisible. People stop hiding who they really are when they think they're alone in a room. I've heard mergers whispered about before the SEC even had a clue. I've seen wedding rings slipped into pockets before the second martini is even finished. I've watched billionaires cry in mop closets because their dad never hugged them. I know where the skeletons are buried because, half the time, I'm the one handed the shovel and told to tidy up the dirt. If you're into stories about the help striking back, or just want to see an egomaniacal CEO get absolutely wrecked by a woman in orthopedic shoes, you might want to hit that follow button and maybe give this an upvote. Trust me, the tea I'm about to spill is hotter than the coffee I've been serving for 2 decades. Really helps keep the stories coming. Tonight was supposed to be the coronation of Blake Sterling. Blake. I remember when he was just a sweaty kid in a rented suit, pitching his startup, Nebula Tech, or whatever buzzword salad they were tossing that week, in the back room of this very club. He was shaking so bad he spilled sparkling water on his crotch. I was the one who gave him a club soda and a fresh napkin, and told him, "Chin up, honey. Can smell fear like they smell cheap cologne." That was 10 years ago. Now, Blake is the cover boy for Forbes. His app does something with AI and logistics that I don't understand, but I understand the valuation, $3 billion. Tonight is the Galactic Gala, the big launch. The night he cements his status as a titan of industry. And he's doing it right here at the Gilded Palm, the club I've managed the floor of since before Blake could grow facial hair. Blake isn't the nervous kid anymore. Money does strange things to people. It acts like a magnifying glass for their worst traits. Blake used to be humble. Now he's the kind of guy who snaps his fingers at waiters and sends back steaks because they don't look aggressive enough. I was checking the place settings at table 1, the alpha table. Centerpieces of white orchids that cost more than my car. Gold-rimmed chargers, place cards written in calligraphy that swirled like smoke. I adjusted Blake's fork by a millimeter. Perfection isn't a goal in my line of work. It's the baseline requirement for survival. Nora, the voice boomed across the empty ballroom, echoing off the crystal chandeliers. It wasn't a greeting, it was a summons. I straightened up, smoothing the front of my black dress pants. My knees gave a little protest, a sharp click that only I could feel. I turned to see Blake striding across the dance floor. He was wearing a tuxedo that probably cost 10 grand, midnight blue, with lapels sharp enough to cut glass. He looked good, in that shiny, manicured way that screams I have a personal trainer and a vitamin drip. Trailing behind him was Tiffany. Oh, Lord, give me strength. Tiffany, 24 years old, influencer with 3 million followers who tune in to watch her unbox purses and complain about airline food. She was Blake's fiancée as of 3 months ago. She was wearing a dress that was less a garment and more a suggestion, silver sequins, barely there, holding on for dear life. "Mr. Sterling," I said, keeping my voice level, the professional mask sliding into place. "Is everything to your satisfaction?" The lighting team is adjusting the gels now. Blake stopped a few feet from me, looking at his phone, not even making eye contact. "The lighting is fine, Nora. It's the vibe. It feels stale." "Stale?" I asked. Old Tiffany chimed in. She popped a piece of gum. "It feels like a nursing home prom." "Blakey, I told you we should have done this at a warehouse in Wynwood. This place smells like soup." "It's lobster bisque, Miss Tiffany," I said. "For the 3rd course." "Gross," she wrinkled her nose, which I'm pretty sure was the only part of her face that could still move. "Anyway, Blakey, look at her." She pointed a manicured claw at me. Blake finally looked up from his phone. He squinted at me like he was trying to remember why I existed. "What about her? She's just standing there," Tiffany whined. "In that black suit. She looks like a funeral director. It's bringing down the energy. Can't we get, like, models to serve the champagne? Girls with wings, or at least someone who doesn't look like they remember the moon landing?" I felt a cold prickle of heat at the base of my neck. I'm 52, not 90, and I look damn good for my age, thank you very much. I dye my hair a sensible chestnut, I keep in shape hauling banquet tables, and I don't need Botox to smile. Blake sighed, the sound of a man who is tired of dealing with details. Nora, she has a point. The optics are important tonight. We have investors coming. Serious money. We need the aesthetic to match the valuation. I am the floor manager, Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice dropping a few degrees. I don't serve champagne, I direct the service. I ensure the timing is precise. I make sure your serious money doesn't wait more than 30 seconds for drink. Yeah, Blake waved his hand dismissively. But we're pivoting. That's what we do, right? Pivot. Look, technically, not even on the club payroll for this event, right? I rented the hall, I hired the external catering staff. You're just here as, what did we call it? Legacy support. Legacy support, I repeated. The words tasted like bile. Right? Blake nodded, checking his reflection in a spoon on the table. So Tiff has an idea, just to spruce things up. A little retro charm, irony. The kids love irony. I have a uniform for you. Tiffany squealed, clapping her hands. She reached into a bag her assistant, a terrified-looking girl named Sarah, was holding. She pulled out a dress. It was hideous. It was a French-made costume from a bad Halloween store. Black polyester with white lace trim, a short skirt, and I kid you not, a little white ruffled headband. Vintage chic, Tiffany beamed. You put this on and you carry a tray, it'll be like a commentary on service. You know, like ironic servitude. I stared at the dress. I looked at Blake. You cannot be serious. It's just for tonight, Nora, Blake said, finally meeting my eyes. There was nothing there. No recognition of the times I'd covered for him, the times I'd smoothed over his drunken rants to board members, the time I'd literally sewn a button onto his jacket 5 minutes before his first IPO meeting. I was just a prop. Don't be difficult. If you want the bonus we discussed for managing the logistics, you play the part. Team player, right? Team player, I whispered. Great. Tiffany shoved the polyester rag into my hands. Go change. Guests start arriving in an hour and try to look. I don't know, festive. Maybe some red lipstick. You look kinda washed out. They turned and walked away, Tiffany hanging on his arm, giggling about how iconic the photos were going to be. I stood there in the empty ballroom, clutching the cheap costume. The air conditioning hummed, a low, mechanical growl. I looked down at the table. Table 1, Blake's seat. My hand went to my pocket. I felt the cool glass of my phone. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. I had a draft message saved. I had been hesitating on sending it. I thought maybe Blake was still the decent kid deep down. I thought maybe he deserved a chance to show he had grown. I looked at the French-made costume. I opened the message. It was addressed to a number that didn't have a name saved, just a sequence of digits I had memorized 5 years ago. The text read, "The window is open." I deleted it. Instead, I typed, confirmed, 8:15 p.m. sharp. Bring the sledgehammer. I hit send. Then I walked toward the staff locker room to put on the damn dress. If they wanted a show, I was going to give them a show. They just didn't know I was writing the third act. The locker room smelled of bleach and tired feet. It was the sanctuary of the invisible class. I stood in front of the chipped mirror, staring at my reflection. The dress Tiffany had given me was an insult woven from synthetic fibers. It was tight in the chest, loose in the waist, and the skirt hit just above the knee, scandalous for a woman of my tenure, ridiculous for a professional setting. I pulled the zipper up. It snagged, then caught. I tugged it, hearing a small rip in the cheap fabric. Perfect, I thought. Let it be ragged. I put on the headband. It had little plastic teeth that dug into my scalp immediately. I looked like a caricature. I looked like what a 24-year-old thinks a 50-year-old servant should look like. A prop, a joke. Mrs. Nora, I turned. It was Miguel, the head bartender. He's a good man, supports 3 kids and a grandmother in Hialeah. He was polishing a wine glass, but he had stopped, staring at me with a mixture of horror and pity. Mrs. Nora, why are you wearing that? He asked. Slow. You are the floor manager. You wear the suit. Not tonight, Miguel, I said, applying the red lipstick Tiffany had demanded. It was a shade called Siren, bright and aggressive. Tonight, I'm legacy support. Apparently, this is what legacy looks like. Miguel frowned, setting the glass down with a little too much force. That man, Blake, he has no honor. After everything you did for him, I remember when he couldn't pay the rental fee for the small room. You waived the deposit. You told management it was a clerical error. I know, Miguel, I said, blotting my lips. The red stain on the tissue looked like blood. You should leave, Miguel said fiercely. Walk out. Let them handle the logistics. See how they like it when the ice melts and the shrimp turns gray. No, I said, turning back to him. I caught my own eyes in the mirror. They didn't look washed out, they looked like flint. If I leave, they win. If I leave, I'm just the old lady who couldn't hack the new vibe. Besides, I smoothed the ridiculous white apron. I have a table to serve. My phone buzzed in my pants pocket, which I had to hold in my hand now because this dress had no pockets, of course. Service workers aren't supposed to have personal lives. I glanced at the screen. A reply. Copy that. The jet just landed. We are en route. Don't let them leave the room. A grim smile touched my lips. Miguel, I said, night is going to be a little different. When the time comes, just keep pouring. No matter what happens, just keep pouring. Miguel looked at me confused, but he nodded. See, Mrs. Nora, I trust you. I walked out of the locker room and into the service corridor. The noise of the prep kitchen was a roar, clattering pans, shouting chefs, the hiss of steamers. I moved through it like a ghost. This was my engine room. I knew every chef, every busboy, every dishwasher. As I walked past, heads turned. Conversation stopped. They saw the dress. They saw the humiliation. Keep working, I snapped, but not unkindly. The lobster bisque isn't going to ladle itself. Let's go, people, we have a timeline. They scrambled back to work, but the energy had shifted. They were angry for me. Good. Anger is a better fuel than fear. I pushed through the double doors and back into the ballroom. The transformation was complete. Lights were dimmed to a moody purple and gold Nebula Tech colors. A DJ booth had been erected on the stage where a string quartet usually sat. The bass was already thumping, testing the sound system. It rattled the fillings in my teeth. Blake and Tiffany were by the entrance, posing for a photographer. Chin down, babe, Tiffany was saying. Look powerful. Look like you just bought the moon. Blake adjusted his cuffs, jutting his jaw out. Looked like he was trying to solve a math problem while holding in a fart. They turned and saw me. Tiffany squealed, oh my God, it's perfect. She grabbed her phone and snapped a picture of me without asking. Caption, even the help is vintage tonight. #Nebula Gala #old school #service with a smile. Blake chuckled. A dry, hollow sound. You look spirited, Nora. Good sport. Table 4 needs water glasses refreshed, I said, my voice deadpan. The floral arrangement on table 2 is listing to the left. Details, details, Blake waved me off. Just mingle, offer hors d'oeuvres, look busy, and try not to frown, it wrinkles your face. I walked away before I could say something that would get me fired before 8:15. I took my position by the bar. The guests were starting to trickle in. The tech bros. Men in hoodies under blazers, wearing sneakers that cost more than my mortgage. Women in dresses that defied gravity and engineering. They swarmed in, eyes scanning the room not for friends, but for net worth. I stood there, holding a silver tray of champagne flutes. The condensation dripped onto my hand, cold and steady. Champagne, I offered to a man with a ponytail and a Bluetooth earpiece. He didn't look at me. He just took the glass. So I told Alon, you can't just tweet that man. He said to his companion, walking right through me. I was invisible again. But this time, I was invisible in a costume. It was a strange kind of power. They thought I was a joke, so they assumed I was deaf too. I circulated. I listened. The Q3 numbers are inflated. A man in a velvet suit whispered near the Shrimp Tower. Blake is counting projected subscriptions as realized revenue. It's a house of cards. I heard the SEC is sniffing around, his partner replied, shoving a crab cake into his mouth. But if the buyout goes through tonight, it won't matter. He'll cash out and it'll be someone else's problem. Who's the buyer? Unknown. Some private equity firm from New York. Shadow money. I smiled tightly. Not shadow money, I thought, smart money. I checked my watch. 7:45 p.m., 30 minutes. I adjusted my headband. The plastic teeth were really digging in now. Pain keeps you sharp. I looked across the room at Blake, who was laughing loudly at a joke that definitely wasn't funny. He was raising a glass, toasting his own reflection in the window. Enjoy it, kid, I thought. That champagne is about to go flat. The ballroom was a pressure cooker of humidity and ego. By 8:00 p.m., the room was packed. 300 people, and the collective self-importance was enough to suck the oxygen out of the air. DJ had switched from ambient beats to something that sounded like robots having a panic attack. The bass vibrated the floorboards, shaking the crystal stems of the wine glasses. I wove through the crowd, my tray lighter now, collecting empties. The smell was a nauseating cocktail of truffle oil, expensive gin, and Santal 33. Everyone smelled the same, like wood chips and money. I moved with the rhythm of the service. Sweep left, grab the napkin. Pivot right, dodge the drunk investor. Smile, nod, fade away. Excuse me. A young woman with lip fillers that looked painful snapped her fingers at me. Can we get some more of these spicy tuna things? And make sure they're gluten-free. I puffed up last time. I'll check with the kitchen, miss, I said. Don't check, just do. She rolled her eyes, turning back to her phone. She was live streaming. Hey guys, we are at the Nebula launch. It is lit. But the service is kinda slow, lol. I swallowed the urge to dump the tray of dirty glasses into her Prada bag. 15 minutes. I made my way toward the VIP section. Tables 1 through 5. This was the inner circle. Blake sat at table 1, flanked by potential investors and board members. Tiffany was on his lap, literally on his lap, feeding him grapes like a low-budget Cleopatra. Babe, stop, Blake laughed, but he didn't push her away. He looked sweaty. His eyes were darting around the room. Panic, he was waiting for something or someone. Where are they? I heard him hiss to his CFO, a frantic little man named Gary who looked like he was vibrating. The lawyer said 8 o'clock. Traffic maybe, Gary squeaked. It's Miami, Blake. Traffic is chaos. I need them here before the keynote speech, Blake snapped. We need the LOI signed before I go on stage. If I announce the valuation without the signature and they back out. They won't back out, Gary said, but he didn't sound convinced. I cleared a plate of half-eaten filet mignon from in front of them. Blake didn't even notice I was there. He was too busy vibrating with anxiety. Then, chaos at table 4. Table 4 was the influencer table, Tiffany's friends, a collection of people famous for being famous. They were loud, drunk on free vodka, and treating the cutlery like drumsticks. Hey, maid, the voice cut through the music. It was Tiffany, who was standing up at table 1, shouting across the VIP gap to table 4, but pointing at me. The music volume dipped for transition, making her voice agonizingly loud. Hey, table 4 needs water, Grandma. They're parched, heads turned. The board members at table 1 stopped talking. The investors paused mid-sip. Even the DJ seemed to falter. Grandma. The word hung in the air like a fart in an elevator. I froze. My hands tightened on the silver tray. I felt the metal bite into my skin. Tiffany giggled, looking around for validation. She's so deaf. Hello, water, chop, chop, she clapped her hands. Clap, clap, like she was summoning a dog, Blake laughed, a nervous, permissive chuckle. Yeah, Nora, let's keep the hydration up, important guests. I turned slowly. I looked at Tiffany. She was smirking, her eyes glinting with malice. She wanted me to snap. She wanted the old lady to cry or yell so she could post it and say, boomer meltdown. I took a deep breath, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The technique I learned dealing with bridezillas in 2005. I walked to the service station. I picked up a crystal pitcher of ice water. It was heavy, cold. I walked to table 4. The influencers were snickering, phones out, recording. Water, one guy with a neck tattoo said, holding out his glass without looking at me. No ice? Ice bruises the spirit of the water. Of course, I said smoothly. I poured the water. Perfect stream, not a drop spilled. Thank you, Grandma, a girl with pink hair chirped. I finished pouring. I straightened up. I looked across at Tiffany. I didn't scowl, I smiled. A terrifyingly calm, grandmotherly smile. Is there anything else, Miss Tiffany? I called out, my voice projecting perfectly over the low lull in the music. Decades of ballroom management means I know how to throw my voice. Perhaps a bib, you seem to have dropped some sauce on your chin. Tiffany's hand flew to her face. There was nothing there. The table snickered. She flushed red. Water is served, I said. Enjoy. I turned and walked away. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I checked my watch. 8:14 p.m. I reached the edge of the ballroom near the grand double doors, heavy oak doors that led to the main foyer. Miguel was standing there, looking anxious. Mrs. Nora, he whispered, there is a situation outside. Security is trying to stop someone, but what? But the lawyers, they are afraid. Let them in, Miguel, I said softly. But Mr. Sterling said only those on the list. Miguel, I put a hand on his arm. Open the doors. He looked at me. He looked at the French-made dress. Then he looked at my eyes. He nodded. He signaled to the doorman. The clock on the wall ticked. The second hand swept past the 12. 8:15 p.m. The double doors groaned. The music seemed to fade into background noise. The doors swung open, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. You know real money when you see it because it doesn't shout. It whispers, and everyone leans in to listen. Blake's crowd was loud money. Logos, neon, noise. Group that walked through those double doors was something else entirely. It was old world. We own the steel mills that built your city money. 2 men in charcoal suits entered first, Evelyn's personal security. They didn't look like bouncers. They looked like Secret Service agents who had just cleared a perimeter. Then came 3 lawyers, carrying leather briefcases that looked heavy enough to contain a body. And then, Evelyn. Evelyn Carlisle is 60 years old. She wears her silver hair in a sharp bob that looks like it could cut paper. She was wearing a cream-colored pantsuit. No sequins, no skin, just impeccable tailoring that cost more than Blake's entire lighting rig. She walked with a cane, not because she needed it, but because it made a fantastic weapon. The room didn't just go quiet, it froze. The DJ, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure, actually faded the music out completely. Is that? Someone whispered near me. Is that the Carlisle group? No way, another guy hissed. Evelyn Carlisle doesn't leave Manhattan. Blake stood up at table 1. His face went from flushed to pale in a heartbeat. He buttoned his jacket with trembling fingers. This was it. The shadow money he had been bragging about. He thought she was here to bow down to his genius. Evelyn, Blake shouted, his voice cracking slightly. He started walking toward her, arms spread wide, putting on his best visionary CEO grin. You made it, we were just getting worried. Welcome to the future. He moved to intercept her in the center of the dance floor. It was a perfect photo op. The young king and the old queen. Evelyn didn't break stride. She walked right past him. She didn't even look at him. It was as if he were a waiter offering a tray of stale crackers. The wind of her passing actually ruffled his tuxedo jacket. Blake froze, his arms still open, hugging empty air. He looked like a mime whose invisible box had just collapsed. Evelyn, he croaked, turning around. The VIP table is this way. Evelyn kept walking. Her eyes were locked on one point in the room, me. I was standing by the service station, clutching my empty tray against my chest like a shield, wearing a polyester-made costume that smelled of factory chemicals. I wanted to sink into the floor. Evelyn stopped 3 feet in front of me. Room was silent. You could hear the ice melting in the buckets. She looked me up and down. Her eyes lingered on the ruffled headband, then the apron, then the red lipstick. Her expression was unreadable. Then a slow, wolfish smile spread across her face. Nora, she said. Her voice was low, gravelly, and carried to the back of the room without a microphone. I see you're dressed for the slaughter. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Evening, Evelyn, you're late. Traffic on the bridge, she dismissed with a wave of her hand. And I had to stop to pick up the check. She stepped forward and did something that made the entire room gasp. She hugged me, not a polite, air-kiss society hug, a real one. She pulled me in, crushing my cheap polyester against her cashmere. She smelled of rain and expensive tobacco. It's good to see you, my friend, she whispered in my ear. You too, I choked out. She pulled back, keeping her hands on my shoulders, turned me to face the room. To face Blake, who was standing there with his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. To face Tiffany, who was holding her champagne glass halfway to her mouth, her eyes wide with confusion. Evelyn looked at Blake, then back to me. She spoke clearly, loud enough for every influencer, investor, and busboy to hear. We reviewed the diligence you sent over, Nora. The numbers on the logistics side were illuminating. She paused for effect. We're ready to buy them out. Hostile if necessary, but only on one condition. What condition? I asked, playing my part. That you're the one signing the deal. I don't do business with children, she gestured vaguely at Blake. I do business with partners. Partner, Blake squeaked. Evelyn ignored him, she looked at me. Ready to own the place, partner? At table 1, Tiffany's hand went limp. Crash. Her champagne flute hit the marble floor. The sound was like a gunshot. Shards of crystal skittered across the dance floor. Champagne foamed around her expensive heels. Nobody moved to clean it up. I looked at Tiffany. I looked at the shattered glass, then I looked at Evelyn. I think I'm ready, I said. But first, I need to get out of this dress. Evelyn laughed. Take your time. We brought the paperwork. And she motioned to one of the lawyers, a blazer. The lawyer stepped forward and held out a jacket, a black silk tuxedo blazer. I dropped the silver, clattered to the floor, echoing the sound of Tiffany's broken glass. I untied the white apron and let it fall. I pulled the ruffled headband off my head and tossed it onto the pile. I slipped into the blazer. It fit perfectly. Right, I said, rolling up the sleeves. Let's talk numbers. The sound of the tray hitting the floor seemed to break the spell. The room exploded into whispers. It sounded like a hive of bees had been kicked over. Partner? Did she say Nora sent the diligence? Was the old lady? Sell everything now. Blake was finally moving. He marched over, his face a mask of panic and indignation. Now wait just a minute. This is highly inappropriate. Evelyn, this woman is staff. She's a waitress. She's wearing a costume, for God's sake. Evelyn turned to him slowly, leaning on her cane. She looked at him with the kind of pity you reserve for roadkill. She's staff. Evelyn repeated. Blake, this woman has been running this room since you were playing video games in your mother's basement. She knows more about your operational overhead than your CFO does. She pointed a manicured finger at Gary, the sweating CFO. Gary here has been cooking the books on the logistics side, hiding shipping costs in marketing. Nora caught it 3 years ago. She just didn't say anything because she was waiting for me. Gary turned a color that didn't exist in nature, somewhere between gray and green. That's a lie, Blake shouted, but his voice wavered. I stepped forward. I felt taller in the blazer. It's on page 45 of the ledger, Blake, under miscellaneous outreach. You were bleeding $2 million a quarter on inefficient routing. I fixed the routes in 2019 just by reorganizing the vendor schedule. I saved this company $6 million while pouring your coffee. Blake stared at me. You fixed the routes. Read the manifests while I polished the silverware, I said simply. It wasn't hard. You just weren't looking. Evelyn smiled. That's why I'm here, Blake. I don't invest in algorithms. I invest in operators. And Nora is the best operator in Florida. A memory flashed in my mind. 5 years ago, a rainy Tuesday. Evelyn had been here for charity fundraiser that was going down in flames. The organizer had embezzled half the funds, the catering truck had broken, the donors were furious. I had found Evelyn sitting at the empty bar, nursing a scotch. She looked defeated. It's a disaster, she had muttered. My name is on the invite. I look like a fool. I had silently slid a napkin across the bar. On it, I had written 3 phone numbers. Call the first one for pizza, the best wood-fired place in town. They owe me a favor and can be here in 20 minutes, I had said, wiping the counter. Call the second one for a jazz band that plays for tips and bourbon. Call the third one to find out where the organizer is hiding. He's at the Motel 6 off I-95. Evelyn had looked at the napkin, then at me. Who are you? I'm just the one who watches, I had said. She made the calls. The night was saved. She raised $2 million, and before she left, she handed me her card. When you're tired of watching, she had said, call me. Play the game for real. Back in the present, the board members were doing the math. One of them, a heavy-set man named Jenkins, who I knew was cheating on his taxes, stepped away from table 1. He walked toward us. Blake, Jenkins said, his voice loud, I think we should hear what Miss Carlyle has to say. At 2, Jenkins, Blake sputtered. She's a waitress. She's the incoming majority shareholder, Jenkins said, smoothing his tie, looked at me and gave a stiff, terrified nod. Nora, I always said the service here was impeccable. Cut the crap, Jenkins, I said. You tip 10% and you try to expense your escorts as consultants. We'll talk about your board seat later. Jenkins paled and retreated. Another board member, a woman who had ignored me for a decade, suddenly found her smile. Nora, darling, I didn't realize you were involved on a strategic level. There's a lot you didn't realize, Susan, I said. The tide had turned. They weren't looking at Blake anymore. They were looking at the woman with the pen. Tiffany, however, wasn't done. She was trembling with rage. She stomped over, glass shards crunching under her heels. This is a prank, she shrieked. It's a prank show. Where are the cameras? You can't just buy a company at a party. That's illegal or something. It's a tender offer, my dear, Evelyn said smoothly. It's already been filed with the SEC as of. She checked her diamond-encrusted watch 5 minutes ago. The board just has to accept it. And considering the stock is about to tank once the audit comes out, they will. Blake looked at his phone. He must have gotten a notification. His shoulders slumped. The arrogance drained out of him, leaving just a scared boy in a tuxedo. Nora, he whispered. Why? Because you forgot who fed you, I said, and you called me grandma. Blake looked around the room. The silence was heavy, suffocating. The tech bros were awkwardly checking their phones, pretending to text, edging toward the exits. The party was dead. The wake had begun. You can't do this, Blake said, his voice gaining a desperate, frantic edge. This is my company, my vision, You move plates, Nora. You don't know the first thing about synergy or scalability. Synergy? I laughed. It was a dark, rich sound. Blake, I manage a room of 300 drunk narcissists every weekend and make them feel like royalty. That is synergy. I coordinate kitchen timing, valet logistics, vendor disputes, and crisis management simultaneously while remembering that Mrs. Vanderbilt is allergic to strawberries. That is scalability. I took a step closer to him. You built an app that helps companies ship boxes. I built a network of people who actually get the job done. You were doing TED talks. I was listening to your suppliers complain that you hadn't paid them in 90 days. That's cash flow management. Blake protested. That's bankruptcy fraud, Evelyn corrected from behind me. And the DOJ is going to love the emails Nora saved. Blake flinched as if slapped. You saved emails? I cleaned your office, Blake, I said. I emptied your trash. I saw what you shredded. I saw what you forgot to shred because you were too busy picking out engagement rings. I looked at Tiffany. She was staring at Blake with horror. Not because he was in trouble, but because she realized the money tap was turning off. You're broke, Tiffany whispered. The venom in her voice was pure acid. Blakey, tell me you're not broke. It's a liquidity issue. Blake shouted, sweating profusely now. It's temporary, once the IPO hits. There is no IPO, I said calmly. Not for you. Evelyn is buying the debt. We're taking the assets. You're getting a golden parachute, Blake, but it's full of holes. This is insane, Blake muttered, running a hand through his gelled hair. I'm the CEO. You can't replace the founder. Watch me, I said. I turned to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I projected my voice again. The bar is closed. A groan went through the room. However, I continued. Those interested in the future of Nebula Logistics under new management. There is a reserve of 1942 Don Julio in the cellar that I've been saving for a special occasion. And since I now own the cellar, I looked at Miguel. Open it up, Miguel, on the house. A cheer went up. A tentative one, but a cheer nonetheless. The loyalty of the crowd shifted instantly to the person with the better liquor. Blake stood alone in the center of the dance floor. Spotlight that had been following him seemed to waver, then drift, leaving him in the shadows. I made you, he hissed at me, his eyes wet. I let you stay on. I gave you a job when you were just an old relic. You didn't give me a job, Blake, I said, leaning in close so only he could hear. You gave me a front row seat to your funeral, and you made me wear a maid costume to it. I reached up and unclipped the name tag from the blazer I was wearing underneath. It said Nora Staff. I tossed it onto his chest. It bounced off his tuxedo lapel and clattered to the floor. You can keep that, I said, souvenir. I'm calling security, Tiffany shrieked, suddenly finding her voice again. This is harassment. Get her out of here. She looked around for the bouncers. 2 large men in black suits stepped forward. Tiffany pointed at me. Throw her out. The bouncers looked at Tiffany, then they looked at me. One of them, guy named Tiny who had helped get dental insurance last year, crossed his arms. Sorry, Miss, Tiny rumbled. Mrs. Nora says you gotta leave. Tiffany's jaw dropped. Excuse me? You heard the man, I said, and take your boyfriend with you. He's ruining the vibe. Evelyn tapped her cane on the floor. Click, click. Well, she said, surveying the room where the guests were now happily swilling the good tequila and ignoring the sobbing ex-CEO. I think we're done with the theatrics. We sign? One of the lawyers opened a briefcase on table 1, right next to the congealing filet mignon. We have the documents here, Miss Carlyle. No, I said. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. No, not here, I said, looking around the ballroom. I'm done with this room. The acoustics are terrible and it smells like desperation. I pointed upward. We're going to the executive lounge. Blake's head snapped up. The lounge? That's private. That's keycard access only. My private collection is up there. I know, I said. I have the master key. I pulled a simple brass key from my pocket. It wasn't electronic. It was the old manual override key for the building maintenance. After you, I gestured to Evelyn. We walked toward the elevators. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. I felt eyes on me, curious, fearful, respectful. For the first time in 20 years, they weren't looking through me. They were looking at me. We stepped into the elevator. Evelyn, the lawyers. We left Blake and Tiffany shouting at security in the lobby. The doors slid shut, cutting off the noise of the party. Silence, blessed silence. You have a flair for the dramatic, Nora, Evelyn chuckled as the elevator rose. I learned from the best, I said. You should have seen the time I had to get a live jaguar out of the bridal suite. The elevator dinged at the penthouse level, the executive lounge. It was a space of dark leather, chrome, floor-ceiling windows overlooking the Miami skyline. It was designed to intimidate. I walked straight to the main desk, Blake's desk. It was a massive slab of mahogany. I walked around it and sat in the ergonomic leather chair. It groaned slightly, adjusting to my weight. I put my feet up on the desk. My sensible, orthopedic shoes looked out of place against the polished wood, and I didn't care one bit. Comfortable? Evelyn asked, taking a seat opposite me. Needs better lumbar support, I critiqued. But the view is nice. The lawyers spread the papers out on the desk. Reams of legalese, purchase agreements, non-disclosure agreements, transfer of power. The terms are as we discussed, Evelyn said, her voice turning strictly business. Carlyle Group takes 51%. You take 10% equity and the position of Chief Operations Officer. Blake retains a minority stake, but no voting rights. Remains a figurehead until the transition is complete. Then we buy him out for pennies. And the staff, I asked, picking up a pen. It was a Mont Blanc. Heavy, retained, Evelyn said, with a 15% raise across the board. As you requested. I nodded, and Tiffany, banned from the premises, Evelyn said, and her social media accounts will be hearing from our legal team if she posts so much as a pixel about tonight. I looked at the papers. Nebula Logistics. Change the name, Evelyn said. Any ideas? I thought about it. I thought about the invisible work, the people in the back, the foundation that holds the house up. Ironwood, I said. Strong, deep roots, hard to break. Ironwood, Evelyn tested the word. I like it. I leaned forward. I didn't hesitate. I signed my name, Nora Vance. The signature was bold, sweeping. Done, I said, capping the pen. Congratulations, Evelyn said. You just bought a company. No, I said, standing up. I just took back the one I was already running. We took the elevator back down. I needed to address the staff. I needed to tell Miguel that he didn't have to worry about his grandmother's medical bills anymore. When the doors opened back onto the ballroom level, the scene had devolved. Blake was sitting on the edge of the stage, head in his hands, weeping openly. A few friends were patting his back, but mostly looking for an exit strategy. Tiffany, however, was not weeping, she was bargaining. She had cornered Miguel at the bar. She was holding her phone up, filming herself. So apparently there was a huge mix-up. She was saying into the camera, her voice shrill and fake cheerful. We were just totally pranking Nora. It was a skit. Right, Miguel? Tell them it was a skit. We love Nora. She's like family. Miguel looked like he wanted to dissolve into the ice bin. He saw me approaching, and relief washed over his face. Tiffany, Miguel said politely. Please say it. She hissed, lowering the phone for a second. Say it was a joke or I'll tell everyone you stole vodka. I stepped into the light. That won't be necessary, Tiffany, I said. She spun around. Her eyes went wide. She saw the blazer. She saw the way the lawyers were flanking me. She saw the change in posture. She immediately switched tactics. She put the phone down and ran toward me, arms open, tears magically appearing in her eyes. Nora, she wailed. Oh my God, I was so worried. Blake made me do it. He made me buy that dress. I told him it was mean, but he said it was branding. You know I love you, right? I always said you were the best. She tried to hug me. I held up a hand, palm out. Stop. She skidded to a halt. Tiffany, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. Stop. But you called me grandma, I said. You snapped your fingers at me. Treated the people who feed you like garbage. I was stressed. She cried. Wedding planning is hard. You're not getting married, Tiffany, I said. Blake's credit cards are frozen as of 10 minutes ago. The company jet is grounded, and the lease on that penthouse, it's in the company name, my company. Her face went slack. The realization hit her. No money, no jet, no content, but we're friends, she pleaded. I tagged you in my story. Security, I said. Didn't shout, I didn't have to. Tiny and his partner materialized. Escort Miss Tiffany to the exit, I said, and make sure she doesn't take the silverware. You can't do this. She screamed as Tiny gently but firmly took her arm. Do you know who I am? I have 3 million followers. And I have the deed to the building, I said. Goodbye, Tiffany. She was dragged out, screaming about lawyers and lawsuits and how her father would hear about this. The room went silent again. I looked over at Blake. He hadn't moved. He hadn't defended her. He was broken. He looked up at me. Nora, he croaked. What happens to me? You go home, Blake, I said. You sleep it off. And tomorrow morning you come to my office. We have a lot of boxes to ship, and you're going to learn how to pack them. He stared at me. You're going to make me pack boxes. If you want to keep your equity, I said, you start at the bottom. Like I did. Looked down at his hands. Soft, manicured hands. Then he nodded, a slow, defeated nod. Okay, he whispered. Good, I said. I turned to the room. The staff was watching. Miguel, the waiters, the busboys, they looked stunned. I winked at Miguel. Table 4 is clear, I said. Reset it. The party wound down, but not in the usual way. Usually, galas end with a whimper, drunk guests stumbling out, half-eaten cake on the tables, sad lights coming up to reveal the stains on the carpet. This time, the energy was electric. The vultures, the investors, had realized that the company wasn't dying. It was just under new management. Better management. They lined up to shake my hand. Men who had ignored me for a decade were suddenly very interested in my opinions on supply chain logistics. Nora, about that routing issue in the Midwest. Nora, I'd love to buy you lunch next week. Nora, credible strategy. I navigated them with the same grace I used to navigate a tray of hot soup through a crowded dance floor. Polite, efficient, but distant. I wasn't their friend. I was their operator. By 2 a.m., the last guest had left. The ballroom was quiet. The staff was cleaning up. Usually, I would be there with them, picking up napkins, counting inventory. Tonight, I stood on the balcony overlooking the room. Evelyn walked up beside me. Had traded her cane for a glass of the vintage tequila. "Not bad for first day," she said. "We have a lot of work to do," I said, looking down at the crew below. "The inventory system is a mess. The vendor contracts need renegotiating, and the HR department is a joke. That's why you're here," Evelyn said. She clinked her glass against the railing. "To fix the mess the boys made." I looked down. Miguel was wiping down the bar. He looked up and saw me. He stopped, tapped the shoulder of the busboy next to him. They both looked up. Miguel raised his polishing cloth in a salute. The busboy gave a thumbs up. I felt a lump in my throat. That was the real victory. Not the money, not the title, but the fact that we had won. The invisible people. "You know," I said to Evelyn. "Blake wasn't entirely wrong." "Oh." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "The lighting was a little stale," I admitted. "Maybe we should change the gels for the next event." Evelyn laughed. "Or the boss, change whatever you want." I looked at the French-made costume, which was still piled in the corner where I had dropped it. A pile of black polyester and shame. "Miguel," I called down. He looked up. "Yes, boss. Throw that maid outfit in the incinerator," I said. "And Miguel, see, burn the headband first." He grinned. "With pleasure, Mrs. Nora." I turned away from the balcony. My feet hurt, the familiar ache of a double shift. But for the first time in 20 years, pain felt different. It didn't feel like burden. It felt like work, my work. I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking on the marble. I checked my phone, one new notification. It was from the bank, a deposit alert, the signing bonus. The number had so many zeros I had to count them twice. I smiled. I walked out of the Gilded Palm, not through the service entrance, but through the front doors. The valet saw me coming. He scrambled to get the door. "Good night, Miss Vance," he said, straightening up. "Good night, Carlos," I said. "Keep the change." I handed him a crisp $100 bill. I got into my car, my old, reliable sedan that had seen better days. I sat there for a moment in the quiet. I looked in the rearview mirror. I wiped off the siren red lipstick. Underneath, I looked tired. I looked 52. I looked like a woman who had spent a lifetime standing in the back of the room. But in the reflection, I saw something else, too. I saw the woman who held the pen. I started the engine. The radio came on. It was a classic rock station. I turned it up. I drove home, leaving the lights of the gala behind me. Table 4 was cleared. The glass was swept up. The bill was paid. And tomorrow, I had a company to run.